Hey everybody, welcome to our Information Week webinar for the month of March. My name is Brian Gillooly. I am the Editor-in-Chief of Information Week, and we have got a fantastic webinar ahead for you today, and it must be a terrific topic. And I know we have terrific speakers because we have got a record registration for this webinar. We've got over 400 people registered for this. So because of that, one of the things I'm going to recommend is that if you have any questions, get them in early because there's a lot of people here. But we're going to be talking about strategies for success with digital transformation. We've got a couple of great speakers, as I said. The webinar is brought to you by Information Week and also by TeamDynamix. We're going to be talking about digital transformation and how business transformation is not a new concept. But companies have been doing this, revamping their product line, sales strategies, et cetera, for quite some time. But you've got to apply the right technology and use the right techniques to be able to pull off a digital transformation. It also means having to take a look at your corporate culture and the workforce and making sure that everybody is bought in. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. But before we do, I have a few things I want to cover just to make this the best webinar you could possibly have. First of all, we want to make sure that you enable your pop-ups within your browser because we do have a question at the end we're going to be asking you. We'd like you to take a quick survey, so we want you to turn that off. Make sure your system sound is on to hear the streaming presentation. Once in a while, people say in the chat box, I can't hear anything, and it's because their sound is off. So make sure you got that on, although you wouldn't know if it was off because you wouldn't hear me right now. If you have any questions, like I said, make sure you submit them to the presenters at any time during the presentation. Don't wait until the end because they do tend to pile up. And I'm sure we're going to be getting a lot of good questions, and we want to get to as many as we can. For anybody who is interested, this is being recorded, and we do encourage you to share this. We're going to be sending you a link tomorrow with the archive of this presentation, and we encourage you to share that with your colleagues or anybody else you think might learn a little something from watching this webcast. I'll also, if you have any technical problems, click on that help icon that you see at in the dock just below the screen there. There's a dock of widgets, and you'll be able to click on help to get some technical assistance. You can also download the slides if you need to. You can share via social media outlets. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do down there. So just make sure you take a look for that. And again, get those questions in as soon as you possibly can. So our speakers today, man, we got some good ones. We've got Bill Kleyman. He is the EVP of Digital Solutions at Switch. He's also an Information Week contributing editor. He is a member of AFCOM. He's spoken at many, many events. I think a lot of people here today have probably heard from Bill at some point or another, but he's a very well-respected speaker in the industry. And another well-respected speaker in the industry is Andrew Graf. He is the Chief Product Strategist for TeamDynamix. He also heads up their advisory board, their CIO Council, and their focus group program. And he's responsible for making sure that customer experience is top-notch at TeamDynamix. So with that, let me turn things over to Bill Kleyman. We're going to be talking about strategies for success with digital transformation. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you so much, Brian. And hey, welcome everybody. I'm looking at this attendee list continue to grow, and we've got so many wonderful folks here. I'm going to say this. Please, by all means, both Andrew and I, we love an interactive audience. So if you do have a question about anything that we're talking about, even if it's related to what we're talking about, don't be shy. Talk about it. Pop it in the Q&A. I'm hoping to make a whole bunch of new friends here as, my LinkedIn and Twitter blows up with really wonderful folks who want to learn about this. So we're going to be talking about a few things. And please understand, this is not going to be a traditional webinar. We're going to dive into some of the weeds here on some of these conversation points because, let's be honest, 2020 was a year where we learned a lot. We really learned a lot. And pushing into 2021, remarkably, we're 3 months in. Welcome back to March, everybody. A lot has happened. We've got some really great things that we've learned over the past year that I'm genuinely excited to share with you. So when you focus on innovation, transformation, and modernization, some of the biggest marketing words you can probably imagine in 2020, but we're going to break those down a little bit. Talking about transformation of culture, process, and customer behavior, in addition to implementing better and improved technology support, what we're doing, creating frameworks for actually empowering digital transformation and discovering new ways to retain workers, adapting to more automated business, and learning the real value of what advanced technologies like things like AI and machine learning look like. Now, this is all super high level, and I do apologize because we are going to get into the weeds here a little bit. Brian Gillooly laid out a bit of an introduction here. What does innovation mean today? We talked about this, right? Business transformation isn't anything new. And this concept of innovation, I legitimately remember when the whole marketing framework started this word, innovation. But people, it's not a cool word. It's not this marketing word anymore. It really is all about survival. And we'll talk about that. And I've had a chance over the past couple of years to work on, and when I say truly innovative solutions, I really mean that. And this includes, we'll talk about this in a second, things like, oh goodness, migrating an entire AS400 ecosystem. I'm not kidding, an entire IBM AS400 ecosystem into GCP and AWS, right? Refactoring all of that, changing green screens, rewriting stuff to Java. It was an extraordinary. But the word innovation itself has changed, right? And it's all about more about this modernization effort. What are some of the small steps that you can take, everyone on this call, that will allow you to be more modern, allow you to be more agile, and actually do better things in a digital world? So the practice that drives your modernization approach is fundamentally changing, right? Where digital has become the catalyst of continuous acceleration of business innovation, right? Where you're primarily now focused on driving profitable growth, helps you become more adaptive and scalable, targets higher level of customer experience and satisfaction, a higher level of customer experience. So you're more deeply connecting with people by using data, by integrating applications, by improving your workflows. And all you really have to do is follow the data, because honestly, many of us today are governed by data. It was a really great quote by Lewis Carroll. I wanted to include it here. Here, we must run as fast as we can just to stay in place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast. Based on current trends, 75% of the S&P 500 companies from 2012 will fade into obscurity 6 years from now when they don't modernize their infrastructure. Now, this word innovation, the many people on this call, I know you've heard about it. And this is the most 100,000-foot word that you can possibly imagine. Everyone's got to innovate. Everyone's got to modernize. Let's actually kind of break down what that means and how this framework around modernization is actually changing, first of all. And second of all, what this framework actually looks like, this new concept of transformation and what we learned over the past year and how things have fundamentally changed. By the way, I love the conversations that are happening in the Q&A. Keep those coming. This is good stuff. So when we take a look at the overarching model, please understand that it's not just one word, but rather it's entire concept. Today and over the past couple of years, what I've seen in organizations, and please understand, this is my experience working with healthcare, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, education, government entities, all sorts, is they've adopted this concept, right? Transformation and modernization. These organizations are often a cultural shift in how we impact people, processes, experience, and how technology is ultimately delivered. It's a philosophy around continuous development of applications and services, integration with users, business, and even market dynamic. It's a practice that continuously evolves, right? It's not a one-stop just to make me modern and relevant again. And it's a tool to help deliver services and applications at market-ready speeds. That's really, really important. We can't be reactive anymore. And most of all, it's a process to help companies innovate at a much faster pace than more traditional or legacy software tools and infrastructure could actually offer. Now, maybe you're getting this a little bit better. Maybe you're actually seeing this. Where are you in this journey? Where are you in this modernization effort? Again, do you need to be evolving your practice? Do you need to be looking at a philosophy? If you deploy some of the best technologies out there, but your staff and your employees aren't empowered, then you really haven't experienced that cultural shift that we were talking about ultimately. Now, in the past year or so, there have also been challenges to adoption, right? To changing the ways that your business does modernize, adopt and adapt some of these new technologies. And here's some of the biggest challenges that I've seen over the past year and moving into these 3 months of 2021. First of all, when we talk about the state of innovation, sometimes it's incomplete, right? Multiple points of solutions from different vendors. Technologies that don't always work together, a disconnect with the business where technologists say one thing, but the business really needs something else. This is a big one, complexity. And I wish I could see show of hands here. Like, do you feel that your environment, even if you're adopting cloud and virtualization and connecting applications together, is still complex? I'd be curious to see what you guys think. But that's the reality. Repeated point-to-point integrations, mostly manual operations, and it's very difficult to test all these components and most of all how they work together, which actually leads into a security issue as well, which we'll talk about in a second. And here's the other element. In working with healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and even government, some of the biggest challenges with legacy architecture, it's compliance, right? Difficult to enforce sets of policies. It's difficult to measure compliance with those policies. And most of all, it's difficult to inject better security practices because, well, you simply lose visibility into your various pieces. So modernization efforts and innovation efforts cannot add to any of these problems. And again, you can adopt small steps to actually modernize and make your environment more improved. Now, popping the hood a little bit more deeply on what's been challenging some of these organizations over the past year, we see that it's kind of a five-prong approach. The first thing that I've seen, regardless of innovation, is that you simply can't have silos anymore. Silos between different people. By the way, thank you for those people that are responding in the chat window. I see you saying, yes, stuff is still complex. Thank you for that. Silos of development and barriers between technology and business, those are always going to be stopgaps for what you're trying to accomplish. This is a big one. Remarkably, I would say this is like the top 1 and 2 challenges that I'm seeing out there, right? As far as a lot of time being spent managing and putting out fires. This is definitely a challenge where we don't want to get rid of people with new technology. We want to give them an ability to bring more value to what they do and what they can bring to the business as well. This is an important one, right? Things like GDPR and, other elements as far as security and compliance. A lack of automation, too much manual processes often make it difficult to enforce security policies. Now, if you're a global organization or if you're worried about HIPAA or compliance, that's a big challenge, right? And you're going to run into, and I love how someone put it already. I'm reading the chat window. It's both complex. This is a good one, unfinished. I love that concept because you're still trying to sort of get to that finish line as fast as you can. The other challenge here is capacity. Now, this is something I've seen across multiple organizations. And most of all, those companies that are trying to adopt to a new digital economy. Now, when I say that, people shopping online, people going and accessing information online, they're finding, time out, I don't know if my applications can scale quite as well. My back office workflows can actually keep up with these users coming in. How do I improve capacity planning and reduce user issues? Because we know our workforce and our users are fundamentally different. So planning around capacity becomes a bit of a challenge as well. And finally, integration, right? Multiple technologies being integrated together, applications, APIs, and new initiatives. This is something that we're seeing across the board. Let me kind of point something out for you. There has been a true balance between cloud computing and what's actually happening in the data center space. We call it the repatriation of some of these workloads with more agile, API-driven workloads and application and development is happening in the cloud. Some stuff is still happening on-premise. Now, how do you integrate these technologies together? How do you make them less complicated? And how do you sometimes customize these solutions so that they're not complicated or not complex? And that's the kind of challenges that we're facing today. And these are questions around applications, user groups, divisions, desktops, legacy database systems, even endpoint devices. You're not limited, again, to this 100,000-foot word of innovation. You can take smaller and better approaches and steps to making all of this happen. We're gonna actually talk about that so that we're not just waving this awesome flag around of how you actually do this. So these next few slides, everybody, listen, if you're on Google, if you're shopping right now, come back here for a sec, okay? Because I'm going to give you some really cool pointers of advice where these shifting cultures and modernization efforts have actually helped user experiences and improved platforms. Now, some of this advice that I'm going to share with you has come from my work in some of the largest hyperscale ecosystems, working with some of the largest DevOps development, application refactoring, and cloud migration organizations in the world, and working on some of the coolest projects you can ever imagine. Again, creating real-life digital twins of massive pharmaceutical machinery, all the way to, like I said earlier, refactoring and moving the AS400 ecosystem into GCP and AWS without the users even ever noticing. It was really, really cool. Now, to make this happen, the first thing you need to understand is you. Literally, everybody on this call, you're important to step one. We need to understand the users, because you, as the user, and everybody in this picture, including Carl sanding the sandboard over, or the surfboard over there, is evolving as well. Because in the past, this used to be our workplace, right? And, right now you're kind of looking at this and you're saying those two dudes in the upper left-hand corner, they're too close together. They should be wearing a mask. But you're looking at this office environment and you're thinking, my goodness, for some people on this call, it's going to be a full year or more since you've stepped foot on an airplane or even have been in an office. So your changing workplace is fundamentally different. And I would not be surprised if anybody here is actually right now sitting like this in their pajamas, because for many people, this is the new workplace. But what hasn't changed is the access to the technology, the request for new systems, working with these new kinds of solutions and ensuring that we ultimately meet our employees and our staff, this digital transformation process right in the middle, because we have to support our people, even if you're sitting in pajamas right now at home. And how we actually empower the kinds of tools and solutions that we deliver to the market. So let's talk about meeting digital transformation in the middle, tools, solutions, and some best practices. What I want everyone on this call to think about right now, I love these messages. No PJs, but a recliner. Right on. I'm glad this is the most comfortable webinar you're attending today. But one thing that I want everyone to take away from this, and please, as you're listening to this cool, soothing voice, think about this introspectively, reflectively. For a second, think about your business, your school, your organization, your hospital, wherever you are, and think about, what do I need to transform? Where are there small things that I can improve upon to make my workflow and my process better? Where are there application challenges? Where are there end user challenges as well? Because you don't need to just embark on this massive journey. You can absolutely find ways that you can transform and modernize in the middle without disrupting too much. So let's talk about that a little bit. These are, let's call them Bill's 3 gears to improve experience and modernization efforts, right? So mobility, security, and experience. In working in modernization efforts, some things you need to consider and take a look at would be things like mobility, right? Ease of use, the kind of content that's being accessed, and just access in general overall. Know that the location for your users might be anywhere and everywhere. You have to do good data flow control, management, understand the use case of where those people are coming in, and then ultimately what they're using to come in. Now, forget the other 2 gears for just a second. That could be your modernization effort. Time out. I'm not kidding, right? Just the mobility. All of a sudden, all your users are at home. How do I improve their ease of access, the content that they're accessing, and how securely they're accessing their environment? Do I need to improve workflows? Do I need to interconnect applications? Do I need to simplify the way I design portals with things like low code or even no code systems so that I can be more agile in terms of how I deliver these solutions? Now, your workforce has changed. There's no question about that. How do I improve security? So with things like data, management control, how do I centralize? How do I do better resource control? Most of all, how do I improve visibility into all of the things that are actually happening in my ecosystem? So again, this could be your modernization effort where you focus on the security element of a distributed workforce or applications that are simply tying in together. And finally, experience. I'd love to find out, of the many, many people that are on this call today, if you're legitimately satisfied with the experience that is being produced by your workforce, or even your workplace ecosystem, your digital environment where you compute every single day. Is it dynamic? Is it fully integrated? Do you have a single point of access? Are there AI-driven technologies that can dynamically improve experiences, even connect applications as you need them without user interaction? And most of all, are you removing those manual processes so that automation, especially on the back end, is happening? And this is, again, talking about extending the digital workforce, improving workforce experience, and creating a much more improved process around workflow automation and managing the user, and ultimately, again, improving the way all of us get access to new tools, new applications, and so on. It cannot be a convoluted or complex way. And again, some of the things that already people have mentioned through the Q&A, again, I love those. Keep them coming. Another element that we need to understand is in working with all these different kinds of users, and I'm going to bring this AS400 project up one more time. We sat down and we took a look at how these users were actually accessing their environment. And what we found is that, they were in their AS400 green screen. We learned all their shortcuts. We learned all the stuff that they were doing. And follow me on this, everybody. We migrated their Mochasoft AS400 ecosystem to Java, right? Copied all the shortcuts, copied all their environments, and put them in front of the same screen. We didn't tell them it was Java. The users never knew the difference, right? So we've hit a business transformation inflection point because of our workforce, where process automation, application simplification are used as powerful experience strategies. Take that word for a second. Experience strategies. Not something you maybe often hear when we talk about things like modernization or innovation, those cool words, but these are sort of like the underlying terminology aspects around transformation, right? Experience strategies. How do you deliver both enterprise mobility as well as digital workspaces to your users to ensure they have the best process possible? Oftentimes it starts with the users, understanding how they're connecting, what they're accessing, and then transforming that to allow them to have a better experience whenever possible. And in that space, when working with this digital workspace, there's a requirement for us, you, me, these mobile and these advanced users. Let me read these off. Integration with advanced use cases. So again, an AS400 system living in the cloud, a new database environment, a new way for users to access applications that potentially are tied in via APIs on the back end, where it's completely seamless, secure, and transparent to the user. Business class productivity features. Listen, we know that many employees are just simply never going to go back to the office. And if you're listening right now and you want to pop into the Q&A and tell me if you're ever going back to the office, I'd be curious to see some of that stream of conversation. But we know that people are going to want a powerful experience, that cultural shift that we talked about earlier, to ensure that they have the right tools and feature sets to be working. App and device level security, this is absolutely critical. When I love that there were some comments on there. Things are complex and fragmented because of the amount of work and time we put into it. And this is something that's really important. The less code, the less technology you require, the simpler your device and application level security is going to be. So actively think about, as you're listening to me, are my systems complex? Are they actually being utilized properly? You might have access to them. Are the back end environments completely crisscrossed with wires and you don't actually know what's happening? It's fascinating to understand that. Thank you to people who are commenting, I'm never going back to the office. And then obviously working with powerful user experience and easier ways to deploy apps and services. So like I said earlier, less coding and less scripting, something that allows you to respond a lot more agilely and a lot more effectively to whatever's changing in your environment. Now, I'm not saying throw code away. I'm saying that, customization is absolutely still important. I understand that every business is unique and a little bit different. But to that extent, it's really important to use these kinds of systems. I really enjoy working with no-code or low-code systems. I've had a chance to work on some different kinds of environments and presented around those systems as well. These drag-and-drop interfaces are much easier ways to use, are much easier way for people to actually integrate different apps, services, and back-end technology. Something to really think about. Again, I'm loving this conversation that's happened in the Q&A that, and here's a great comment. I'm not planning to go back, but need more technology to support from the job to continue to work productively. And absolutely, this is the conversation that we're having around digital workspace requirements. Thank you for these comments, everybody. Keep them coming. Support for reliability, performance, and automation. That's really important, right? We can't have these systems going down. We need to ensure that they're operating properly. Things like latency is horrible, right? There's no situation where, somebody logs into the machine and they have like 5 minutes to go get coffee. And obviously automation. I talk about this one a lot. And again, it's one of those really high-level words like innovation. You can automate workflow processes, user login, connectivity to different kinds of applications. You can do preset application connectivity that are only active while the application is being used. People-centric, human-centric technologies where we're not trying to get rid of anybody, but we're trying to empower people to do great things. And I agree, one day we're going to go back for meetings, coffee, and donuts, but I'm not sure how soon that's going to be. So as you're sort of designing your environment, as you're kind of building this kind of architecture, everybody here, and please understand, I'm loving this conversation that's happening right now. Let's ask some real questions, please, and ask them with me as you're listening to this. Am I ready to evolve, right? What kind of questions? Do I have some really serious pain points? Just because it works, I'm using air quotes, I know you can't see, doesn't mean that's necessarily helping you or improving your business or actually helping your users. That's a question to ask. Am I ready to evolve, and do I need to be evolving? How do I create competitive advantages with digital transformation? Now, if I asked this question earlier on, you may have been like, Bill, I still don't even know what digital transformation is, but we talked about it earlier. For you, it might be mobility, might be security, might be simple application integration. It might be a user study analysis to see where digital workspaces need to be tied better so that you improve your user experience. Or it might simply be saying, okay, I've got all these applications, I need to make them less complex so I can manage them. Also really important. How do I really know how my users are connecting today? And we certainly had a crash course in all of this. and how users were connecting out, how we were happening to come upon the applications. And, somebody brought up a really good point, rural issues with dial-up, and slow connectivity. And what we're seeing with things like 5G as well, knowing how users are connecting and empowering them is really, really important. And finally, how do I support new digital experiences? And this is, again, going back to, let me just go back to this one slide here. This is the important slide, right? This digital workspaces. Now, all of these bubbles can apply to you, or maybe none of them, or maybe one or two of them. But the point is asking yourself, how am I connecting? What's improving? Is there really any way to evolve or transform specific parts of the business? Those are really good introspective questions to begin to ask, where you can flow through this people-centric technology system and improve your overall architecture. I want to leave everybody here with a few final thoughts before I pass it off. And I do want to talk about this a little bit. Getting started. I've worked with organizations that have, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 employees. And I've worked with organizations that have, 10, 20, and just a few hundred people. And going on a modernization journey every single time is really intimidating. I mean, please understand, it really is. And I get it. And we don't want to be the people here who are waving the flag and saying, everybody's going on a modernization journey, but we don't give you a map for it, right? That's cruel, right? Here's a ship, go sail the seas, good luck to you, but there's no sunsetting. So in that sense, here's where I've had a lot of success in getting started on a modernization journey, right? Where we can throw the word innovation in there as well. Learn more about your users and how they're connecting. I talked about this earlier. Believe it or not, oftentimes that's the first question that I ask. Is there a user study that's been done? Show me how they're connecting. Are you seeing what people are doing? Do you have any network latency? Are you showing any performance metrics? You're not. All right, well, maybe we should do some network monitoring to see where we can improve some of this stuff. You can learn so much by simply shadowing and following your users from different groups and different divisions to see what's happening, how they access applications, and where there's actually challenges. This is where we talk about leveraging monitoring and visualization tools that help you see these bottlenecks in workflows. Please understand, almost every single time I've done a study in visualization and understanding workflow analyses, we found things that managers, executives, and IT leaders say, I did not know that was a problem, or I didn't even know that was there. Sometimes the user doesn't even know that there's an issue with a connection, or that data is getting lost, because, if it works eventually, they might not say anything, but might be highly inefficient. Finally, see how users are interacting with applications, APIs, and data. That's a part of that workforce analysis process as you analyze bottlenecks, visualization, monitoring tools, and so on. You might see, we forgot to update this API. That's a bad thing. You need to make sure stuff is updated. Or wait a second, we're not connecting to the right data repositories, or these data repositories are not being saved. So these are really, really great things to just kind of start out questioning. Again, first step, learn about the users, how they connect, and what they're accessing. I can't tell you how many things I've learned before starting on any project around modernization, the kinds of things you can improve just by understanding the user. Leverage solutions which support advanced use cases. This is where I'm going to challenge everybody. Think about tomorrow. And it's such a contextual question because each of you are different and each of you are different kinds of organizations. And by the way, I continue to enjoy these comments. I'm glad this is helpful. But again, this means supporting and having good experiences being delivered to all sorts of devices, right? And we have all different kinds of employees. We saw different kinds of organizations adopt e-commerce solutions. We saw them survive what we saw in 2020. Dick's Sporting Goods store is a very, very good digital use case transformation actual example that took their brick and mortar store, completely modernized it, understood how their users were accessing their different tools and devices, and empower them to become a sales powerhouse during a pandemic. Really, really interesting brick and mortar use case. But again, understanding devices and what they're doing and how they're accessing is going to be really important. This also means supporting cloud and virtual systems. Don't be afraid of cloud. Don't be afraid of virtualization. I'm sure that most of everybody here has some kind of a virtualization or even containerized solution in place, but cloud computing can be a great balance for how you support advanced use cases. Support shouldn't limit the way users connect or the devices that they use. The whole concept of what we're doing here is to empower people to use the devices that they feel most comfortable with and technologies that they feel most comfortable with. Let me give you that AS400 example. Could we have created a UI that was super shiny and absolutely amazing that would have replaced the green screen and given it to all the users? You betcha. We could have done that. Would all of those users come back and said, Bill, what is this garbage? I have no idea how to use this bunny icon or whatever you created here. They would have been really upset at us. So instead, we modernized the underlying platform and created a UI and UX, user experience and user interface that they actually knew, and they could just completely shift over, even though one was old school Mochasoft fat client, and the other one was built entirely on Java and was super agile. Same green screen, same green screen, quote unquote, connecting to a no longer flat file ecosystem, one that's hosted in the cloud, but these users can continue to use their shortcuts and so on. This is where the idea of don't pull the rug out from your users just because something is shiny. You can absolutely use new and innovative systems to help users connect to any device that they use or any system that they are comfortable with. Don't be afraid to test new technologies. I really can't stress this one enough. This is usually where we get to the third part, where we start talking about some of these new systems. These new solutions incorporate AI-driven solutions and even predictive analytics to help you gauge, hey, there's going to be network latency or there's more users coming in, where you can do things like predictive analytics to make your environment fundamentally better. New solutions allow you to design codeless or even low-code architectures to support workflows and users. This is a big one. I've spoken at several large conferences on the concept of codeless and low-code solutions. I absolutely think that these architectures are great. Now, they do not replace DevOps, DevSecOps, DevSecTestOps, architectures and design where you need to create some customized solutions, but codeless and low-code drag-and-drop solutions are very, very cool to work with. And finally, advanced technologies help with security, access permissions, service and app integration, and simply simplifying your overall ecosystem, something really important to understand. And again, some of these drag-and-drop solutions, they're more hardened back ends and easier API integration, like I said, service and app integration, simply make it easier to use. At the very least, start to look at these technologies. Now, finally, like I said, you don't have to go down this journey on your own because it can be kind of intimidating and it can be kind of scary. And I'm being open and vulnerable with everybody on this call, which I get it. This is a very high-level topic, and oftentimes it's unique to every single person on this webinar, and it is. That's why I work with good people. We work with good organizations to help reduce that complexity and fragmentation and help guide that connected journey. So, it's really, really important to understand that, there's people to navigate your journey, and it's important to ask contextual questions that relate to your business. Coming in and say, okay, how do I innovate and how do I transform my business? Any partners can be like, I don't know, you can buy X, Y, and Z. But if you have contextual challenges to your organization, steps 1, 2, and 3, like we've got over here, that's where you're going to be able to have a better navigation to your journey and actually be able to improve the things that you do every single day. Now, to talk about some of these solutions, to talk about the architecture that help people work better together, I'm going to pass it back to Brian and also welcome Andrew to the conversation.
Bill, thanks a ton. That was fantastic. Answered a lot of questions, raised a lot of questions that we can talk about when we get to Q&A as well. One of the things that somebody commented on, which I couldn't agree more, is, you talk about digital transformation, but is the business ready to evolve and transform? And maybe we can get into that a little bit. If you did join us late, that was Bill Kleyman. He is the EVP of Digital Solutions for Switch, and again, an information contributing editor. I also wanted to, just 3 quick things just to remind people, if you haven't already, there is an attendee survey. Again, just go to that widget doc. You'll see the survey widget there. Take that survey and give us your feedback. It will help us improve our events moving forward. Although, how do you improve on this? But we also wanted to let you know that the slides are downloadable as well. You can just go to that widget and click on it, that icon, and download the slides. And finally, yes, this is being recorded. You will get an email by tomorrow morning that will have a link to the archive of this presentation. And finally, if you have any questions, definitely, I see you're good at the switch. That's a great one, Nicole. Thank you. But yeah, if you have any questions, get those in. If we don't get to them before the end of the presentation, we will have Bill and Andrew respond to them. So let me turn things over to our next speaker, and then we'll get to Q&A. Our next speaker is Andrew Graf, and again, he is the Chief Product Strategist for TeamDynamix and also a co-founder of the company. TeamDynamix is the sponsor of this webinar for us. We greatly appreciate their support. But Andrew is going to be talking to us about the perspective that he has with the customers at TeamDynamix. So Andrew, let me hand things off to you.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate the introduction and obviously Bill for the fabulous insights into this world of transformation and modernization. You know, I think what Bill has really talked about is the what and the why, right? What are the opportunities? What is transformation? What do we look for to find those opportunities, and why might we want to do it? What I want to shift to a little bit is the how, and we're going to talk about a category of solutions that enables us to transform. So I like some of the words that Bill used, especially positioning and framework. How do you position your organization to be able to adapt and take advantage of these new opportunities, and what framework are you going to use to enable that? So that's where these categories of solutions come in, called integration platforms. Integration platform as a service, where automation platforms, IPASS is something you'll commonly hear. But I want to dive in a little bit to this particular topic. So we talked with Bill a lot about all the things that we might want to consider to enable sort of the future of our organizations. Well, what does an IPASS do, right? We talked about it being the tool to enable the how do we get this done, okay? So think about an IPASS as a solution that provides connectors, okay, and flows. So think of flow as a business process, or data moving from one place to another, or an automation that now takes the place of something we were doing manually that ate up a lot of our time. Think of it as a solution that can help us take better advantage of all the APIs that are constantly flooding into our ecosystems, all those opportunities, but they're hard to leverage. How do we transform data so all systems can operate as we'd like them to, even if they're by their natures different? So as we think about the IPASS tool, I want to give you a little visual. Think about IPASS as a way to automate the business processes within your department or between businesses, whether that's an IT process, finance, sales, marketing, IT, facilities, all of these processes. And we think about automation. Bill talked a lot about how do we free people from having to do the mundane, or free people from having to work with a roadblock that's getting in the way of us working remotely. How do we enable them? How do we let them spend their time on higher value activities? These are the types of things that an integration and automation platform can help us address. So as far as some of the benefits here, why would we do this? Well, think about a codeless solution where the people who currently know how to build these connections, I'm sure you have these teams in your organizations. You know, I'm sure if we asked, hey, who has this team who will write integrations? They know how to use the APIs. They're experts at scripting. They know how to write to databases. They're experts in SQL. I bet everyone would raise their hand. And then if I ask the other question, it's, okay, how deep is their backlog? Is yours 6 months, like the wedding game, right? How about 12 months? How about 18 months? How about 24 months? We keep going. So it's typically not that we don't have the skill set, we don't have enough of it. So those teams leverage an IPASS solution to turbocharge their efforts. So whereas I could do 5 key pieces of work or units of work in a week around integration automation, now I can do 30 because it's easier for me. The second piece of this is, how do I expand the community of people who can actually build these integrations and automations? How do I make it easy for people who know what the business problem is to actually implement this in a safe way? Bill talked a lot about silos and breaking those down. We often see that data needs to change hands, and processes transcend a barrier between departments, divisions, customers, et cetera. Well, there's often a lack of trust between those organizations. So a good solution when you're out in the market looking for one will help build that trust by providing guardrails. So for example, if somebody needs to consume my data or add activities for my teams, I may want to limit what they're able to do, so I'm comfortable. That's what a good IPASS can help you do as well. You may be thinking about, okay, all of these new solutions we're buying have lots of APIs. but it takes somebody with special skills or knowledge to figure out how do we actually use these and how can we implement those ideas. So one of these tools will also help you wrapper the APIs with a usable interface. So I can see the data without having to understand XML or code. I can use it in my business processes. Another benefit that we often see is, I call it implement to benefit cycle or implementation to benefitation cycle, right? How can we get value faster? Most implementations of enterprise systems these days, think about your CRM system, think about your ERP system, think about the point solutions that surround those two, okay? How quickly can we get benefit by implementing that vision? And what this does is significantly reduce dev cycles. So if I need to integrate, an ERP implementation on average 80 to 100 different integrations, what if I can cut that time down to a third of what it was, maybe a quarter of what it was, and I can streamline testing? Well, guess what? I've just developed a solution faster with less headache. And, Bill made a great point, and we use the word chaotic. We're seeing it all the time. Things are moving so fast. How do we take the chaos out of our business when it comes to that adaptation and evolution? So what we're seeing the usage of this product focus on is the speed and reliability of adaptation. So when we see a new opportunity, we can move quickly. We have tools to help us make sure that system or that process is going to scale. To Bill's point, a lot of times people have no idea when a business process is slow. They can look across these complex networks of solutions and they think, you know what, this could be faster, but we can't exactly pinpoint. Well, a good solution should point those things out. In addition to that, think about altering existing solutions to create new solutions that didn't exist before. So you have all these different point systems. One of the benefits of these platforms is now we can look at it differently and say, okay, what if I was able to take data from these three systems, okay, synthesize it into a new data set to help us make better decisions? It's a new solution to a business problem that did not exist and doesn't exist natively in any of the tools that we own. It's the genesis of new value because we can actually make better use of that data. That's, I think, a big part of this that people underestimate with one of these platforms is how can we create solutions that don't exist in any of our software applications today? Right? These are the types of things that we're able to accomplish. And I think if you're sitting there and you've ever been part of these strategic conversations where someone has a vision for transformation, and then you just sit there and say, okay, I get it. And you sit back and say, how am I going to get this done? How are we going to get this done? We're finding people turn to the integration and automation platforms to do that. How, right? We talked about speed of development. That's one part of it. But the other part of it that takes a little bit longer to think through is if we're automating mundane, non-value add, time-consuming, error-prone processes, if we're taking the manual effort out of things, we will have more time to focus on adding value across our resource pool. So it's really twofold. Yes, it speeds the implementation to benefit cycle, but it also frees us to be able to spend more time on the value side of our business because we're taking friction out of our ecosystem. And I think that's the biggest part of this. Bill also talked about UX. So how do we adapt our user experience, right? As we see that opportunity, again, it becomes part of an implementation question. Once we figure out what we want to do, how do we implement? Well, if you have a great integration and automation platform, you can now surface the data required to feed those user experiences like you've never been able to do before. It's that agility, that implementation to benefit cycle. I think that's really, really critical. The other thing I'll point out here as we look at this is when you're looking for a tool like this, there are solutions that are focused on integration, so moving data from point A to point B, transforming that data, and then there's automation platforms. If you can find a platform, which we focus heavily on, that does both, that's an enormous value add because now we have a single point for all this type of work. So as we're thinking about some of the standard components of an integration automation platform, these are some of the key areas, right? Codeless flow builder. How can I visualize a business process without having to write code? Now, if I want to write code, great, should be able to do that too. Data management. I talked about that, harmonizing and choreographing data. A shared library, so we have the ability to reuse and reuse. So as we get deeper into our integration and automation and transformation journey, I have this library that I should be able to pick up momentum because I'm no longer building flows from scratch. I'm now incorporating flows that I've already built into my new flows. So I can take what was a complex piece of logic and now just reuse that piece as a widget almost. API management. So how do I make it easier to take advantage of the APIs in my ecosystem? That's one part of it. But if you ask yourself, I'll ask this question. If I was coming to audit, let's say we have an advanced security certification. Let's say that our chief information security officer gets audited, and someone came to us and said, we need a catalog of where APIs are used everywhere in your ecosystem. That's usually the sound that you hear. People looking around the table saying, oh my gosh, we've been using APIs for a decade and it's just grown like the plants on the outside of a chia pet. We don't know. It's just everywhere. That's hard. So a great API management tool not only makes APIs easier to use, but it also helps catalog and create a library. It also helps answer the question of, demonstrate to me that all of your APIs in use are being authenticated against and leveraged in accordance to your current security standards upon which your certifications are based. Again, that's a very uncomfortable question for most organizations. If it's not for you, great job. But if it is, a great integration automation platform can help you because it can clearly identify the areas where you're not in compliance, but also make it easy to be in compliance. Think about when you go through an upgrade with one of your systems and someone says, well, how is this going to impact us? Where is this thing tied into everything else? That's an enormously difficult process. Anyone, I'll raise my hand, who's been through an ERP upgrade, this is a big problem. So being able to look at this and say the impacts we're going to feel are in these specific places and I can retrofit them centrally makes a big difference. Again, it's about agility for us. Okay? And your out-of-the-box connector list, I should mention that, right? You have a connector library of all the different connectors that you're using so people can freely use them in flows. These solutions come with a lot of them out of the box. It should also be very easy to build your own, sort of synthesize your own connector. So a couple examples of common things organizations automate that are mundane, take a lot of time, are frustration. Employing onboarding and offboarding is one. Think about that, right? Think about being able to move data between systems. You bring on a new system, you want to leverage that data in lots of other tools. How are we going to move that data? How are we going to change it? This is another thing to think about, okay? So I think one of the best quotes we've heard from a client was that all of these minutes that are saved add up day after day, year after year. And when you start looking at scale, it's pretty remarkable what can happen to an organization with a platform that can enable that positioning, and it gives you a framework and the positioning to get this type of work done. So I think that's critically important. Now, as it comes to service management extension, you know, we also have TeamDynamix, a full enterprise-grade service management platform. But think about this a little more broadly. You can use an integration automation platform with any service management tool you have. So whether it's ServiceNow or it's Remedy, right? Think about all the processes that are fulfilled with some manual steps that could be automated. That's an enormous area to save time. It can transform that user experience too, because now you have something that works 24/7, 365. It only raises its hand when there's a problem that needs to be resolved, and sometimes can resolve the problem itself. So that's one thing to think about too. As you know, I'll bring it into a little more specific focus. The process of service fulfillment is a great place to look to start for automation opportunities because it's usually ripe for it. Okay? So I'll hand it back there to Brian. And hopefully between the two of us, Bill and I, we've given you a lot of things to think about.
Quite a bit of stuff to think about. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it very much. In fact, one of the things you mentioned was the need for process documentation and monitoring and whatnot. And man, I think that got quite a reaction from the attendees in the chat box. And I've been through that myself. So appreciate you bringing that very important point up. So we are going to go to questions now. We've gotten a few questions come in, and if you have any questions you want to add, please just type them into the Q&A chat window, and we'll get them here and we'll ask our speakers. Let me ask this first question. I'm going to go to you, Andrew. And the question was, does TeamDynamix IPASS I think is TDX IPASS like a middleware to connect all apps?
You could look at it that way. Yeah, I think IPASS is sort of the logical evolution of what middleware was in the early 2000s, right? It's that next generation that makes it a lot easier. It makes it easier to report on, easier to troubleshoot, right? Easier to build and own and manage. So it's really placing. Think of taking the middleware applications that you knew from long ago, maybe it's old Tibco stuff, and putting the ability to use it as a platform. So different departments can have their own integration tools on the same platform, and we can make it a lot easier to expand that audience. So I think it's sort of a couple generations down from middleware. But at the core, yes, it can be used for connecting all your apps together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Bill, let me go to you. And this is an issue that came up quite a bit during your presentation, a little bit in Andrew's as well, and among the chats too as well. But this issue of complexity. When introducing new technology like automation, how do we ensure it's not a fragmented process? We had one of our attendees say, the more automation we add or the more digital transformation we go through, the more complex it gets. How do you keep it from becoming fragmented?
There's not going to be a silver bullet. And I don't think anyone here on this webinar is going to say, yeah, just do this and you're not going to be complex or fragmented in your environment. And you're right, Brian. And between Andrew and I, we probably saw 4 or 5 or 6 different people on the chat and the Q&A ask something similar. Andrew brought up a really good question. Sit down with the development team and ask them how many APIs they've got in their environment. You're going to get some blank stares. And it's not to say that maybe they're not up to date. Maybe they're completely fine. But you legitimately can't pull out a number. A lot of times, again, and I go back to this, it starts with a user application and ecosystem study. And you start to reduce complexity by understanding contextually how you can impact your users, their applications, their services, and their workflows. And again, I bring back the AS400 example. It's silly. I know you guys might be sick of it, but again, we could have replaced that entire front end with a brand new, shiny, pretty kind of an ecosystem and an interface, but it would have done nothing for the users other than frustrate them. So complexity and fragmentation doesn't necessarily mean, replacing and changing and, ripping everything out that you might think is complex, because what you might think is complex is actually how users operate. The best way to reduce complexity and fragmentation is take a look at where you have manual processes, things that are day-to-day operations that take up an hour or 2 hours that you just don't need to be doing anymore. And again, a lot of it is a user study, right? Whether it's, automating HR operations or automating back office functions or, ensuring, proper login and log off of users that maybe are no longer on a system, or properly spinning up or spinning down resources. All of these things can be done sort of, off screen autonomously by different kinds of systems. My challenge to everybody is to find places, and again, this is an introspective review of where there are complexity, where there's challenges, where you take this manual approach to managing your systems, and how you can simply make it easier. Don't try to solve every single problem at once. Just focus on a few of where you have some complexity and how you can make it better.
And Andrew, thank you, Bill. Andrew, when I introduced you, one of the things, your responsibilities I mentioned is customer experience and customer excellence. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing from customers about this concept of complexity, and do you agree with how Bill characterized it?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, the complexity is starting to happen within the products. So I think every system is striving to striving to reflect that duck analogy, very peaceful on the top, but under the water, their legs are furiously moving. The customer doesn't want to see that. And with an integration automation platform, all the gears that are turning, we're trying to abstract that level of granularity from the people actually operating in the systems. And I think that bubbles up. Customers don't necessarily care about the gears turning. They just want results. Unfortunately, and think about us from working from home. We want results now. So how can we remove the human element that delays that? And how can we remove complexity? I think a lot of it is an evolution, right? So we talk about agility and iterative processes. More now than ever, we're going to take something to market, a new UX for our customers, for example, and we're going to learn from it. The question is, how quickly can we adapt it? And so I think that's a lot of this is what we're talking about, is just how can we be more agile as organizations to meet the needs of our customers, internal or external, our team members working from home, our customers who consume our products. How can we change faster and less painfully?
Well, you teed up the next question perfectly, Andrew, because it's on this issue of time and speed. And something we didn't really talk about, which is how fast does this ramp? For example, if your customers take this on, how fast are they able to create new flows and get through that automation backlog we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, so obviously it's everyone's least favorite answer. It depends. But let me clarify that a little bit. So to Bill's point, which I think was an excellent one, focus on a few areas that when we fix it, they're going to throw you a ticker tape parade, right? Let's make impact. So find the things that are so painful that you can get the most support within the organization. And when you fix it, you look like a hero. And then what I'd suggest too, I think a lot of, especially in our space with integration platforms, you see a lot of vendors that will offer you training and then they're like, hey, have at it, cut you loose. What I'd suggest is whoever you work with, whether it's us or someone else, pressure them to train you while you're fixing a big problem. So that at the end of your quote unquote training, you know the system, but you've also accomplished something that people are going to throw you a ticker tape for. To me, that's the best way to get off the ground. Skip the process of training with generic examples, and then you're, kind of ejected out into the atmosphere. Focus your training contextually within something that's meaningful for your organization. I think that's a great way to catapult. And when people are giving you high fives, people get more excited about doing more. Right? You fix something inconsequential, people shrug, say that's neat.
Bill, speaking of creating heroes and throwing ticker tape parades, this next question is a great one. How do you capture data about your workforce, and how can you make that information actionable?
So, first of all, I love this conversation, right? Don't try to fix the entire ship or try to do a plank at a time when you can. I love that idea of, make meaningful change and get your users to become excited. Andrew pointed out a really good point there. Make your users champions of your technology and what you're deploying. I think that's great. When we've done user studies, some of the things that we've done include actual interviews of people, sitting down and watching them work, seeing what they do, understanding shortcuts and systems, actually working very closely with different departments, asking for things like shortcut keys if they're using any specific applications. On the back end, if you're using traditional systems, let's say like Citrix or VMware, you've got a virtual desktop, for example, you can do some shadowing as well to see which applications get launched and so on. Some of the cool things that you can actually do is see exactly which applications and which services start most frequently for each user and at what time, so you can actually see if there's giant bumps in application resource utilization during certain peaks and flows in your organization. You can also see which databases are being pulled from more frequently, which APIs are being called. There are a lot of things you can do when you pop the hood, and that's where you start to learn where there's some inconsistencies, challenges with the environment. Again, it could be completely absent from the user ever even noticing this kind of stuff, but when you pop the hood, you can do that. Network monitoring tools are great. Application performance monitoring tools are great. User experience tools are great. Shadowing sessions, some manual processes in terms of learning about users are great as well. Really a lot of unique ways to do this. Again, like Andrew said, focus on what's important to your organization. And that's how you start those user studies.
Awesome.
Yeah,
so
I can add to
Go
that,
ahead,
Brian.
Andrew.
Let me jump on
Yeah,
to
let's
that a
get a
little bit.
closing
I would
comment.
also, I think the metric side of it is really intriguing and often where you learn the most. But we've also benefited pretty heavily from interviewing customers, even using a third party, a UX firm, for example, where they go out to not the customers who are always giving you feedback, the ones you never hear from, internal or external, and just ask, how do you use this? What do you do when you come in? It's remarkable how people use your tools in a way you had never anticipated or you didn't understand. I can't tell you how many times we sit there and say, they're using it how? Well, we got to have a better way to do that. And these are the people you never hear from. There's almost a bell curve where there are people who don't use your tool at all, and there's people who use your tool a lot, and it intersects with the one that's also how often you hear from these people. And so there are going to be users and customers you hear from all the time with varying levels of constructive criticism and feedback. But then there's this whole other group of customers and users who just accept your tools. But if you ask them, they'll come up with brilliant ideas on how to improve them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Terrific questions from our attendees. That was just exceptional, all the chatting that went on, and we do appreciate that. I do want to thank our sponsor, TeamDynamix, for their support for this webinar. And then don't forget, by tomorrow morning, you'll get a follow-up email with details and a link to the presentation on demand. And again, we invite you to share that with any colleagues that you feel may learn something from this event. So I've got our corporate lawyer standing right next to me with a bat, and he's telling me I better read this next paragraph. He says, this webinar is copyright by Informa. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Information Week and TeamDynamix, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. So on behalf of our speakers and TeamDynamix, my name is Brian Gillooly. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.